Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 2017 Royal Tyrrell Museum Speaker Series. Today, the Royal Tyrrell Museum and its cooperating society are proud to present Mr. Jeff Zimmer. Jeff is a Fish and Wildlife District Officer based here in Drumheller. Jeff is originally from East Central Saskatchewan, where he grew up along the forest fringe near the shores of the mighty Saskatchewan River. Passionate about nature, he moved to Lethbridge, Alberta, in order to attend Lethbridge College, where he graduated with a diploma in environmental sciences. Jeff subsequently worked as a conservation officer in Saskatchewan for 8 years, navigating the mighty Churchill River before doing a little career detour to work with another kind of wildlife by becoming a city police officer. After 11 years working the mean streets of Calgary and the not-so-mean streets of Medicine Hat, Jeff returned to his true calling, that of being a game warden. He has been a fish and wildlife officer for the Alberta government since 2008, and in that context has wrestled grizzly bears in the Pincher Creek area, wrangled snakes in Medicine Hat, and a couple of years ago accepted a promotion to district officer and moved to Drumheller to tackle a different kind of animals, dinosaurs. So today, Jeff will present an overview of the various types of snakes that call southern Alberta home, how to identify them, and most importantly, how to stay out of trouble when you see them. So without further delay, I present you Mr. Jeff Zimmer.
Thank you, Francois. Morning, everyone. I guess you can hear me. I can hear me. So yeah, like Francois said, I'm going to talk to you today about snakes, in particular our native species to Alberta, and just kind of an overview. I'm going to go through the different kinds of snakes we have, how to identify them, and then right down to if you find one in your yard, what to do. If you encounter one of these fellas, if you're hiking in southern Alberta somewhere, what to do and what not to do, and right into what happens if you actually get bit by one. I've never been bitten by a snake. I've been bitten by a grizzly bear before, but never bitten by a snake yet. So we'll see what happens. But this presentation is a modification of one that I used to give down in Medicine Hat. Special thanks to two of the biologists that work down there, Sandy Robertson and Joel Nicholson. Joel originally came up with this PowerPoint. Sandy's kind of revamped it since she's gotten there. She's also sent me some pamphlets up at the front here. So help yourself. It's basically just an overview of what my presentation is going to be. So snakes are important. Hating snakes makes life hard for them. And snakes are like grizzly bears or cougars. They're misunderstood. I've heard stories from my wife that grew up in southern Alberta about how her dad would take the hoe and just chop the heads off the rattlesnakes that were out in the field. And that was just a common practice because, didn't want to get bit, didn't understand what the snakes were there for, what have you. Mind you, nowadays, society has changed. People understand a little bit better because of these talks or because, of programs they've seen on TV, how important snakes are. And, I dealt with a rancher near Medicine Hat that he loved having snakes around his yard. In fact, he put an ad on Kijiji. He was looking for bull snakes to put around his haystack to keep the mice down. So the biggest challenge for snakes is, of course, public pressure. They're essential members of our environment, and like I said, they're great rodent control. So if you dislike them, so you can dislike them, but please don't kill them. Okay, that includes even the little garter snakes that would be more common to this area than the rattlesnakes. So snake identification. Anybody know what that snake is? Garter snake. You know what kind of garter snake? Okay, good thing you're at my talk. There'll be a test at the end. Okay, so the red-sided garter snake. This is more common to boreal forest areas. You can see the map. Grab my fancy pointer here. See the map up in the corner here. So the forested areas in the foothills, mountains, this little area down in the Cypress Hills. Okay, most garter snakes don't get all that large, 46 centimeters to 130. I don't think I've ever seen one quite that big. So this is one that I found south of Pincher Creek. I was actually hunting gophers and seen this colorful fellow on a rock. And he was maybe, I would say, about close to a meter in length. Wandering garter snakes, these ones are very common around here. In fact, yesterday I was out on a bit of a snake hunt. That's why I have this cooler here. I was successful in my snake hunt. I'll talk about that at the end of my presentation. But I was looking for one of these guys because, like I said, they're very common to this area. This one, a lot of times people mistake it for rattlesnake. And we'll get phone calls that, I came across a baby rattlesnake, or there's a baby rattlesnake in my yard, because these fellows don't get very large. They have similar color to what a rattlesnake is. But as we'll talk about later, there's a few distinguishing features that these guys don't have that rattlesnakes do. This fella I came across mountain biking last year just on the South Hills here in Drumheller. It's very colorful. He was probably about 40 to 50 centimeters in length. So the plains garter snake, this one, again, very common to this area. Parkland, prairie region. This is the one that you're going to find in your yard, in your garden, hanging around your house. Again, not a very big snake. Okay, very distinctive. They have that yellow stripe down their back. So this would be a common sight you'd see in the spring. This is what we call snake sex. So that's what these snakes are doing, is they get into these ribbons and they twirl around and do their thing. That's how they make babies. So, bull snakes. We do have bull snakes around here. In fact, some pretty large ones, as you'll see in my cooler here later, how big they can get. These are a very unique snake because they're a constrictor, so they do have fangs. All the other snake species we talked about prior to this one don't have teeth at all. These fellows have fangs, but they don't have venom. They're non-venomous. They're a constrictor, so their way of catching and killing their prey is they'll latch on with those fangs, and then they'll wrap themselves around their prey, and they'll basically just smother it to death or squeeze it to death. So if you were to be bitten by one of these, it'd be similar to a dog bite, especially the larger the snake, the harder it's going to bite. If they do bite you, they're really hard to get off because they'll latch onto you pretty good, so you got to kind of pry their head off of you. And of course, I've never been bitten by one of these, but I've talked to people who have, and it's not an enjoyable experience. So. And these guys, I've actually found them over 200 centimeters in length, so over 2 meters in length. And they'll be, about that big around. Okay, so they're a very large snake. These guys, I call them the grizzly bear of the snake world, because if you make them mad, they will come after you. So if you have to move one, and we'll talk about moving them here later on. If you have to move one, the trick is to be quick, grab them with your tongs, move them to where you have to move them, and then leave them alone. Because if you try shooing them away with a hoe or a rake, they will go after you. So very distinctive markings on bull snakes. Quite different from what a rattlesnake is. Their head is about the same size as their body, whereas a rattlesnake you'll see has more of a diamond-shaped head that's larger than its body. They also have a round pupil. You see the round pupil there? All the other snake species have round pupils except for the rattlesnake. The rattlesnake actually has a vertical slit for a pupil, similar to what a cat does. The western hog-nosed snake, we don't have any of those around here. They're more in the sandhill area, where the red deer kind of converges with the South Saskatchewan. I've never run across one of these guys, but they're a very interesting snake. They have like a turned up nose, and they'll actually dig in the sand. And these guys, they eat bugs and grubs and stuff like that they'll dig out of the sand. They're also the only species that'll den by themselves. All the other snakes will den together. So here you can see the turned up nose and the hog-nosed, where he gets his name from. Similar markings to what the rattlesnake has. They're unique because if you get close to them, snakes don't have ears, so they feel the vibration when you're walking. So if you don't want to run into a snake, walk like this, so they hear you coming, feel you coming. These guys, if you get close to them, they'll flip over on their back and they'll play dead. So this fellow is very much alive. He's just laying there playing dead. And with his mouth open, they get terrible breath. It smells like rotting flesh. So they'll lay like this, their mouth open, and you'll smell him and see him. You'll think he's dead. You'll move on. And after you move on, he'll roll back over and disappear on you. That's the only snake species that plays dead. So the prairie rattlesnake, probably our most misunderstood snake. People are deathly afraid of rattlesnakes. If they bite you, they'll kill you because they're venomous. You'll find out later that that's not true. Snake bites from rattlesnakes are very, very rare. In Alberta, more common with our canine species. And even in those cases, the dogs end up being just fine, a little bit of Benadryl, and they get through it. But identification is important because if you are ever bit by a snake, it's important that the medical personnel know what kind of snake it is. So very distinctive. They have that rattle. And if you get close to one, they're very cryptic and shy. So as soon as they feel you coming, they'll coil up, they'll start rattling, and they're basically telling you, leave me alone, get away from me. So they'll give you a fair warning. They'll back away from you. They won't come towards you. And most rattlesnakes I've run into, if I'm trying to catch them, you got to be quick because they want to get away and hide. As far as quickness goes, the warmer the weather, the quicker the snake. Okay, I've caught bull snakes when it's like 8 degrees outside, and I've picked them up with my gloved hand, and they're basically just like a limp piece of rope. Put them into my bag and move them. 36 degrees above, and you got to be really quick to grab a bull snake. They're very fast. Okay. The other thing with rattlesnakes is they have that arrow-shaped head. Okay, they're the only snake that has that head shape. And if you look close, you can also see that vertical slit that they have for a pupil in their eye. So this is what if you're going to encounter a snake, or a rattlesnake, that's what they're going to do. They're going to coil up like that, and if you watch them, they're going to be slowly backing away from you, trying to get away, not coming towards you. So rattlesnakes are only venomous snake. They're found mainly south of the Red Deer River. We're a little far north here. I've talked to locals. I've gone on snake hunts. I've never seen anything to indicate that we have rattlesnakes here in the Drumheller River Valley. But you get closer to Dinosaur Provincial Park, over to that Jenner country, then you're going to start running into rattlesnakes. As far as the southern part of the province, pretty much right across the south to Lethbridge. So the Milk River area, Medicine Hat, like I said, Lethbridge, you're gonna run into these guys. So the Old Man River area. So they feed on rodents, small birds, amphibians, much similar to the bull snakes. Bull snakes will go after rabbits and rodents and stuff. So they leave the den April to May. They're usually the last ones to leave the den. I know when we've done the snake handling course with the biologists in Lethbridge, or in Medicine Hat, we'd go out to a den site south of 7 Persons, usually the end of April, and these would be the only guys hanging around the den site yet. All the other snakes had already moved off. So I think they're just lazy. They're the last ones to leave, and usually the last ones to return. They may travel up to 25 kilometers, and I think, let's see for the next slide here, yeah. So this was a study that some biologists did. This area here is Suffield, the Suffield Block, down by Medicine Hat, the South Saskatchewan River. So this was a snake den that the biologists had located. And what they did was they crazy glued radio trackers onto a bunch of the snakes, the rattlesnakes. And they tracked them over the summer to see how far they went. And this one in red here was a female snake, and she went 25 kilometers out, 25 kilometers back. If you think about it, that's a long way to go if you're only this long, right? So this is important when I do these talks, because you can see it's pretty much a straight line that these snakes are going out and back. So it's important because they leave their den, they come back to the same den. So if someone were to intercept the snake here and move it down to here, there's a very good chance that snake would not make it back to its den. Okay, so we'll talk about relocating, moving snakes here in a bit, but important that if you have to move a snake, you don't move it very far, or best case scenarios, you just leave it alone. So homes of snakes. This is Pigeon Creek, which is Pagan Creek, which is south of Seven Persons. There's actually a Alberta Conservation Association site there that they use for recreational purposes, hunting, hiking, stuff like that. And all along this slope, there's dens here where these snakes live. So I said they always return to the same hibernaculum. Sometimes, more with the garters, the odd bullsnake, if they find an old foundation, or if you have an older house where the foundation's caved in around it, and they can get in underneath that foundation, they'll actually overwinter and make that into a den. We had a fellow outside of Medicine Hat that I think we relocated about 100 snakes that were living underneath the foundation of his house. So what we did was we put a large Rubbermaid container with a snap-on lid and gave him a pair of snake tongs. And every day when he went out in the backyard for smoke, he'd just grab some snakes and throw them in the bucket. And then I'd come and pick it up once a week and take this bucket of snakes to another hibernaculum way up north along the South Saskatchewan River, and that's where we would put them in, was in there. And talking to the biologists, they're the ones that gave us direction on this. Their thought process was, we'll start them off in a new den. That way, when they do their migration, they'll come back to that den. As far as if they did that, the biologists couldn't tell me if that was the case or not. So just, again, some hibernaculum locations. You can see why down in the valley here we would have snakes, right? We have those hills like that with the large crevasses and slumping slopes and stuff. So the biggest thing for them is, of course, they have to be deep enough where they're not going to freeze over the winter. So they won't dig their own holes or their own dens. They're going to find, like I said, a large slump, and that's where they're going to den up. So all species, except for the hog-nosed, will hibernate together in a communal hibernaculum. So rattlesnakes don't eat bull snakes don't eat garter snakes. They're all communal. They'll stay in the same hibernaculum. There is, from what I've been told, there's the largest hibernaculum in Alberta is south of Oyen along the Red Deer River, and apparently there's close to 1,000 snakes that overwinter in there. So my guess would be it's probably the size of this room, right? All these snakes in there, but I've never seen it. So threats, biggest thing is road mortalities. Every year we get calls to the office about a snake that's been run over on the 570 near the Atlas coal mine. Okay, because I know we have bull snakes out there. It's quite a common area for bull snakes, and they tend to get run over on the road out there. Urbanization, habitat loss, Medicine Hat. If you're familiar with Medicine Hat, the ranchlands area of Medicine Hat, they built that area right. That's snake heaven there. There's tons of snakes. So the city is constantly dealing with snakes in people's yards. But that's just where they happen to build the residential area, and people just got to learn to live with them. So. Industrial development. This was an area in Medicine Hat, again, where they had some flooding issues. They replaced a bridge along Ross Creek. And when they did revegetate the area, they used this plastic mesh they put in there just to keep the erosion down. And they had told, of course, this is all in consultation with the biologists. This mesh was supposed to break down after, so many years with the UV and stuff like that. And this was, I think, 4 or 5 years after they put the mesh in. And this was one of the issues we had where snakes were getting tangled and caught in there. And, of course, ended up dying. So I'm not sure what they did with that. It was brought forward to the biologists. They were going to deal with it. And I would imagine they would have gone in and removed the netting to prevent that. I've seen other areas where they put in, it's like corrugated plastic pipe, like a half pipe. And they'll put that in and kind of make an area where the snakes can't go through. They'll have to travel along that pipe just to route them around areas like this. Intentional persecution, I put that one in there because we do have, there is a black market in snakes, and I guess that's more my expertise when it comes to enforcement. Silly things, like I remember my partner in Medicine Hat, he was on Kijiji one day and comes across some guy selling a rattlesnake. So he phones him up and says, "Hey, you got a rattlesnake for sale?" And the guy says, "Yep." He goes, "Okay." He says, "How much?" $50. He says, "Okay, where do you want to meet me somewhere?" He says, "Yeah, I'll meet you at the Tim Hortons downtown." So my partner leaves our office, which is downtown, walks 2 blocks down to the Tim Hortons. Here's this guy standing outside Tim Hortons with a pillowcase with a snake in it, waiting to collect his money. So, of course, he was quite surprised when the handcuffs went on. He found out he was under arrest. But this guy had no clue that snakes were protected and blah, 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 or so he said. So silly stuff like that, people taking them home, turning them into pets. Up until a few years ago, garter snakes were not protected. They are now. So it was very common for kids to catch garter snakes and take them home and turn them into pets. On the more sophisticated side, we've had large-scale investigations where there was a fellow that was taken down via search warrant in Edmonton, and he'd actually caught a male and a female rattlesnake and was breeding them and selling their offspring. So quite sophisticated, because I can't tell the difference between a male and a female. This guy could. So awareness. If you're in anywhere near that Medicine Hat country, you're traveling Highway 41 south of Oyen, you're going to see signs warning about snakes. The Brooks area, I think I just seen a sign they'd put up the other day. Some signs are there permanently. Other ones, they actually just kind of open up and close during the season, just to remind drivers to look out for them. Some data here. I don't know what year this was, but this gives you an idea where most of the roadkills are of rattlesnakes. And you can see Lethbridge over here, Medicine Hat. Here's the South Saskatchewan River and the Red Deer River. So a lot of these areas is within, that migration route from the river where they'd be denning to, where they're going for the summer. So something to keep in mind if, for whatever reason, you encounter a snake crossing the highway and you want to help it out. In the spring, they're going to be moving away from the river valley, and in the fall, they're moving towards the river valley. And the reason I mention that is I watched a fellow one day east of Medicine Hat, and he was trying to move a bullsnake with a shovel, and he'd move it across the road, and then it would just go back up on the road again. He kept trying to move it across the road. Well, of course, the snake wanted to be on the other side of the road. So I helped him out, and got the snake across the road on the right side, and then he was fine after that. So in industrial mitigation, this again, the biologists, they deal with this on a regular basis. Down in the southwest corner, they're working a lot with the wind turbine people that want to put the wind turbines out in the wind farms and stuff. So they're looking at rattlesnake. If they want to put a wind turbine up, they have to be 200 meters away from a den site. That's the minimum. Some of the strategies, Lethbridge is kind of unique because they have a rattlesnake hotline. So if you find a rattlesnake in your yard, you phone the hotline, and some trained people with the right equipment and stuff will show up and move that snake out of your yard. Okay? Medicine Hat, when I was there, we trained the city bylaw, the community peace officers, the RCMP, the county bylaw. We trained them on how to move snakes, how to catch snakes, proper equipment to have, first aid if they were to get bit or someone were to get bit. And so we worked with the community that way to ensure that snakes were not being harmed or moved improperly. So education and awareness. This talk, of course, I do have some brochures, like I said, at the front here. If you go on the Environment and Parks website, they do have a link that'll take you to a lot of this information. What I tell people is that if you're wanting to research snakes, what to do with snakes, first aid if you get bit and stuff like that, keep it local, because of course the way they deal with snakes in Texas is totally different than the way we deal with snakes here. Okay, only because they have water moccasins that if you get bit you have 3 hours to live. Okay, we don't have that here. So public education. This is a sign in Red Cliff, one of their hiking trails. They've got these signs up just to warn people that there are snakes in the area. So if you encounter a snake, main thing is don't panic. I think the stats say that 97% of the population is afraid of snakes. And the other 3%, like me, love them for some reason. So don't panic and start stomping the snake to death or getting everybody else excited. Biggest thing is keep your distance. If you can identify the snake, okay. That way, if you're hiking through, say they're doing a group talk out here at the museum, and they're going out and they encounter a snake and it's a garter snake. Not that big of a deal, but if it's a bull snake, it'd be a different story. So try and identify it. Leave it alone. If it's causing some concern, so if it's in your yard and you're worried that your dog's not gonna leave it alone or something, then definitely call our office. I do have some equipment here. I can come and move the snake out of your yard for you. Okay, but for the most part, leave the snake alone, and it'll move off on its own. If you're hiking in snake country, just be cognizant that there are snakes out there. Like I said, when you're walking, typically you're not going to run into them. Biggest concern is if you're mountain biking or dirt biking. When I was out on my little hunt yesterday, there was some fellows ripping around on dirt bikes, and of course they're not going to see that snake until they've run it over. So just be cognizant they're out there. Some preventative stuff in your yard: just keep your lawn short, clean up your garbage, bird seed, stuff like that. If you've got a rodent issue, maybe you don't mind having a few snakes around, but if you've got a rodent issue, especially in rattlesnake or bull snake country, you're probably going to have a snake hanging around. But they're doing you a favor. So, what I used to tell people in Medicine Hat, because they have a huge gopher issue, is we'd get badgers would move into the city to clean up the gophers. People would phone our office and complain, this badger, it's going to eat my kids and it's going to kill my dog, and come get rid of it. And the first question I'd ask is, well, do you have a gopher? Is there lots of gophers around? Yeah. Well, outside the badger's there, he's doing us a favor. He's cleaning up the gophers. Well, I don't want the badger. So, okay, I'll make you a deal. I'll come and remove the badger, but I'm going to leave 2 bull snakes instead to take care of the gophers. And then there'd be a pause, and they'd say, never mind, I'll leave the badger. So you can help. I said don't kill or harass snakes. Conserve that prairie habitat. So if you're looking at building an acreage or something like that, and it's along a river valley and there are snakes around, try and preserve some of that habitat for them. And habitat, with garter snakes, they love gardens, right? Flower gardens, stuff like that. You're probably going to have the odd garter snake hanging around there, but totally harmless. If you do have to move a snake, we talked about that migration route. If you do have to move a snake, 50 to 100 meters is all you're going to move it. Because if you move it farther than that, then we run the risk of the snake not being able to get back on its migration route and find its way back to its den. The other thing is, too, don't return it to the river. Okay, I've heard of people that, I found a snake in my yard, so I took it 5 miles down to the river and dumped it off. Okay, that snake's not going to live. It's not going to find its way to where it was going or back to its den. Okay. Hibernaculas, if you think you have one in your yard, on your back 40, if you think you know where you found one while you're hiking, let us know. We do have a database. The biologists have a database where they keep track of hibernaculas because those areas are protected. I showed you the mitigation, the setback and stuff. So they keep track of where those are. It's also good knowledge for me because we've had people phone the office asking about where they can find rattlesnakes because they want to find them and kill them and cook them and eat them. Well, of course, they can't do that, but so we want to make sure those sites are protected from persecution as well. So all the snakes I talked about are native to Alberta, and they're protected under our Wildlife Act and regulations. So possession, buying, selling, any of that stuff is illegal. So if you hear of something or you know of somebody that might have a snake in their possession, by all means phone our office, or you can phone the Report a Poacher line. You can remain anonymous. We'll investigate it and we'll deal with it. Okay, in a lot of cases, I've had people that, kids especially, they'll find a garter snake, they'll take it home. They don't realize they can't do that. Okay, so to me it just turns it into a public education. Take the snake, return them to where we found them, and everything's cool. So bites. I took out the gory pictures. Just I didn't want to scare anybody. Just kidding, there wasn't any gory pictures. So the biggest thing is try and identify the snake. If it's a bull snake, you're going to know it because, like I said, they bite really hard. They're probably going to latch on. You're going to have difficulty getting them off. In a lot of cases where I've heard of people getting bit, it's because they're playing around. They're like, I'm going to grab this snake because if you grab it by the tail, it won't bite you or something, right? So just people being silly. Other case, I've heard people hiking along the river valley, and they'll be climbing up a slope, and they'll put their hand up, and all of a sudden there's a snake there. They get bit on the hand. So just be careful when you're doing that. Bull snakes, like I said, especially because they will get angry. They'll go after you. They're tree climbers, so be cognizant of that. If you're in an area where there's bull snakes, they could be in a tree. And in a lot of cases, if it's really warm, they'll go in the tree just to kind of cool off. Or they'll sometimes go up to where there's a bird's nest, and they'll try eating the baby birds out of the nest and stuff. So they're very good at tree climbing. They're also, all our snakes are aquatic. I've seen rattlesnakes swimming down the South Saskatchewan River. Okay, so all our snakes are quite aquatic too. So if you're in the water, just be cognizant of that too. So as far as our venomous snake goes, our rattlesnake, people think that, okay, if I get bit by a rattlesnake, I got 3 hours to live, right? Or I got 2 hours to get to the hospital. Okay, that's not the case. Our rattlesnake, their venom is not nearly as toxic as what a rattlesnake in Texas would be. And that's because of our climate. Okay, we're on the northern end of their range, so the toxicity of their venom is very low compared to snakes in a warmer climate. Okay, that's also why they have more venomous snakes in, say, Florida than what we have up here in North America or in Canada. Okay, so with a snake bite, especially a rattlesnake bite, you still want to get to the hospital. In a lot of cases, they might just monitor you, but make sure you identify what kind of snake it is that bit you, because the doctor's going to treat a rattlesnake bite totally different than a bull snake bite. Okay? In a lot of cases with rattlesnake bites, it's going to be what's called a dry bite. In some cases, they don't even bite. All they do is they throw their head at you. So you'd be walking along, and of course, these guys they don't want to bite you to kill you to eat you. Okay, it's purely defensive. Okay, so if you get too close to them, or they're sleeping somewhere and you step on one, there's a very good chance they're just going to throw their head at you and hit you in the leg. So you're going to feel up on your leg, and then all of a sudden you'll hear the rattling. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is, of course, get out of the area, pull up your pant leg, have a look, see if there's any puncture marks. Okay, if there are puncture marks, don't be in a panic. Don't jump in your car and drive 200 kilometers an hour to the nearest hospital. Okay, you want to get to the hospital in a relatively quick time. And what they're going to do is they're going to monitor you, because in a lot of cases, because it's defensive, the snake may and the venom comes out through their fangs. They're like a hypodermic needle. So what will happen is when they go to bite you, they'll either release the venom before they bite you, or they'll actually release the venom after they've bitten you. So there's a good chance that the venom didn't even go into your system. So that's why at the hospital they're going to monitor you just to see if you show any effects. Okay? The effects are going to be similar to a bee sting or a wasp bite. You're going to have swelling in that area. If you're allergic to bee stings or something like that, then you should have more of a concern than somebody that's not allergic to bee stings. Okay? Things you don't want to do is apply a tourniquet. Okay? You don't want to make an incision. You don't want to get your buddy to suck the venom out. Okay? You don't want to ice the wound. And most of all, you don't want to kill the snake. Okay? Because really, the snake's just defending itself. Okay? So there's no reason to kill the snake. There's no reason to take it to the hospital and say, hey, this is what bit me. Okay? Important to identify the snake, but we don't need you to bring it to the hospital. If you go into sporting goods stores, they sell the snake bite kits. Total waste of money. Okay, because in there they're going to talk about making an incision. There's going to be a razor blade in there, sucking the wound, everything else. You're just going to create more problems for yourself. Okay, so snake bite kits, like I said, waste of money. Any questions on snake bites? Like I said, with dogs were probably the most common thing in Medicine Hat. I talked to several of the vet clinics about how they treat a dog with a snake bite, and they give it Benadryl. They treat the wound like they would any other puncture. They keep it overnight, monitor it. They'll give it Benadryl, and usually within a couple days they release it. But older dogs or dogs with health conditions and stuff will sometimes die because of a snake bite, but again, very rare. Human bites, even rarer, and like I said, most of them are just on the hands, and there's never been a recorded death from a snake bite in Alberta. So with handling, snake tongs, I carry a pair in my truck, or a set in my truck, and we used to use 5-gallon pails with a snap-on lid, a bunch of holes in it, until the biologist said, well, there's a better way, so we actually use a snake bag. And you can buy these from any safety supply store. They can order them. If you go down to Medicine Hat, I think most of the safety supply stores have this stuff in stock. Snake bags are better because you can put the snake inside the bag, and the way the bag's set up is it's a bag inside of a bag. So you can pull the bag out, transport the snake to wherever you're going to release it, and then you just open, there's a little zipper on the side, you open it and the snake slithers out and away he goes. Okay? The biologists, they use other stuff like tubes and straps and when they're doing their studies. So this is common in the biological world where they'll put the snake head into that tube just so they can handle it. If they're going to put a radio tracking device on it or whatever. So never try to pick up snakes unless you have proper equipment. Of course, garter snakes are different. They don't have teeth. They have venom that's only effective on their prey, which is usually bugs, worms, stuff like that. They will bite you, but they're not going to do any damage. It's like a frog biting you. Okay, but I would suggest gloves. The defense mechanism that garter snakes have is they pee all over the place. So that's where snakes get that slimy connotation from, is because they pee all over themselves and it stinks really bad. I've seen kids pick them up and they're handling, all of a sudden they drop them, they're smelling their hands and trying to wipe that stink off. So that's their defense mechanism. This snake here he's a rattlesnake that was about this big. He ended up in a fella's shop on the farm. And it was late in the fall, and he was quite concerned because he liked having the snakes around for rodent control. And so he didn't know what to do with them. He actually brought him into our office, and one of our biologists looked after him through the winter because it was already too late to put him into a hibernaculum. And then he was released in the spring, and as far as I know, he's doing just fine. So snake tongs, they're about $80 if you go to a safety supply place. That's the best way to handle snakes. Some of the pros use the hook and loop method or whatever, but I mean, this is way safer. This is actually my son here. We lived on an acreage near Bull's Head Creek, south of Medicine Hat, and we'd get snakes in the yard all the time, rattlesnakes, bull snakes, and no fear of that kid. This one here was, my wife was cutting the grass, and he was wandering around the backyard, so my kid went and grabbed him, put him in an ice cream pail till I got home, and then we went and released him. There's those snake bags I was telling you about. Other methods too, like you said, I got my cooler here with my snakes in it. That works as well. Snap-on lid. If you're using the lid, make sure you're putting the lid on with the tongs. Snake into the bucket, lid on with the tongs. For the guys, they're snapping the lid on and they get bit on the hand or something like that. Some more information, you can phone our office here. We can point you in the right direction. Like I said, I brought some of these pamphlets here. You can help yourself. There's a few websites there. Basically, if you just do a search Alberta snakes on Google, that'll take you to the right place. We do have one more snake. This one was just discovered here a few years ago, kind of in that southeastern corner. They're common in Saskatchewan. They're slowly moving into Alberta. And this is the yellow-bellied racer. And as you can see, quite similar to our garter species. Again, non-venomous, no teeth, quite small. So it's kind of neat to see that snakes are thriving here and they're actually moving into Alberta. Thank you.